QuickBooks Enterprise 2021. Two businesses and personal bookkeeping in one QuickBooks file using classes, checks, and personal direct expenses. It's time to boldly account where no accountant has accounted before with QuickBooks Enterprise 2021. Here we are in our practice file. We currently have the open windows open. You could open the open windows by going to the view dropdown, selecting the open windows list. In prior presentations, we set up our practice file so we can be breaking out our information into two businesses or two locations and a personal file all in one QuickBooks file with the use of classes. We're focusing in on the vendor section or the payable section, or you can think about it as the expenses section here. Last time we thought about those types of expenses that can be applied directly out, meaning they don't need to be split. We're not paying for something that needs to be split between two different businesses or business and personal. And this time we want to think about those direct expenses that are going to be related to the personal side. Get a little bit more detail on the personal items of personal expenses. We're not going to be entering the bills here. We'll do that in a future presentation, but rather we're thinking about the checks, the direct decreases to the checking account, which are done with the check form, whether we do it with a check itself, writing a check, or if we have like an electronic payment, we still think of them as the same form here. Now, like with the business expenses, you might do some of your expenses for your personal expenses by actually writing checks, or you might have electronic payments of some kind as well. If you have the electronic payments set up, then you have a couple different ways that you can do this process. Many times, if the payments are going to be automatic type of payments, then you might actually wait till they clear the bank and pick them up, record them in our books at the point in time they do so, as the point of time we then see them when we are doing either bank feeds with the use of bank feeds, or when they are on the bank statement. Or we might be writing checks and entering the checks as we do the checks, and then we would actually enter the physical check, and then we would reconcile that check to what happens on the bank side of things at the second point, and that would happen either with bank feeds and or with the bank reconciliation process. So let's go back to this, and we're going to enter this kind of on a cash basis method. We're going to enter these directly into our checking account. This would be similar to if you were dealing with bank feeds, where you might see the items cleared and then have to assign them out. Again, we're thinking about those items that don't need to be split between personal and business, but just those items that can be personal. We'll talk about those splitting items later. So I'm going to go to the lists dropdown. We'll take a look at the chart of accounts. We're going to go back into that checking account. So we'll go back into the checking account here. And so we're going to enter some more checks. I'm going to make them as of 03/15/21, just so they'll keep continuing on in our date ranges to keep us on the latest date. So the checks will be remaining at the bottom here as we enter new checks. I'm going to delete the number. Now, if it was an actionable check that we wrote, we would want the check number, but if it's an electronic payment or something like that, then you wouldn't want the check number here. And so then let's take a look at the split icon, and then let's go through our chart of accounts. We're focusing in here on the expenses. Now remember, we have the expenses laid out by number as to whether they're going to be for business 1, 2, or 3. The ones that start with 6s are going to be business 1, 7s, business number 2, and the 8s, those are going to be our personal expenses down here. So first, let's think about the chart of accounts in the 6s, because that's the one that was generated by QuickBooks and it was generated for a particular business. And then we can deviate from that and say, okay, what might we do it on a personal side? On a personal side, we might call it something different than we see on the business side, and some of these business expenses we may need to split out between one or two business and personal. So advertising, obviously we wouldn't have that on the personal side. Automobile, we might have an allocation of the auto expense on the personal side, and we'll have to think about how to do that. We'll do that in a split kind of format. Bank feeds, that's something that we should, bank service charges, we should be splitting this because we only have one bank account. So we'll have to split that out too. So we'll talk about that later. Computer and internet expense. If we have a home office and we're using the internet, we may need to split that out. If we have a separate office for our businesses, then those could be direct expenses for the businesses. The depreciation expense. If we have depreciable property, then we can have the depreciation expense. We may not be recording that for the personal side of things, as it might be necessary for the business side of things for tax preparation and whatnot. Dues and subscriptions, probably going to be more of a business type of thing. If we have dues and subscriptions on the personal side, we may actually call them what they are for, what we're paying for actually, right? And then insurance expenses, we may have personal insurance that wouldn't be business related. So let's go ahead and enter that one. So we're gonna have insurance expense. I want to pick up the same the account numbers with an 8 now instead of with a 6. So it's going to be 83300. So I'm going to say this is going to be 83300. So we do have insurance expense. We set it up already. I'm going to say tab, and it's going now to the proper class, to the personal class. Let's go ahead and say that this is going to be for 1,750 insurance. That looks good. Let's go ahead and record that. So I'm going to record it, say okay or yes. Go back to our reports drop down. We're going to go on down to the company and financial. Take a look at that profit and loss by class. Changing the dates up top from 01/01/21 to 12/31/21. And so there we have it. Now our insurance is down here. You can see this nice tiered structure. The 6s, the 7s, then the 8s. We can use the filtering option to make this look a little bit cleaner, although it will be long if we have all of the items open here. Let's go back on over to the checking account, see what else we have. If I hit the split button, hit the drop down here. So we were on insurance expense, so interest expense. We might have personal interest expense that we'd have to be dealing with, but if we only have that one bank account, then it might be on the bank account. Meals and entertainment. We might have meals and entertainment, but we'll probably call it something else. On the personal side of things, we may want to actually break out restaurants or the particular restaurant that we have, or types of restaurants, sit down versus fast food and whatnot. And then we have office supplies. We might have office supplies for the home, but we would probably call them something else other than the office supplies. So notice the personal account expenses names may be different. They're going to be customized towards a different goal, not towards tax preparation, not towards what we needed to do to generate revenue, but purchases that we had in order to live well, to do what we want to do, and therefore our categorizations will follow that objective and may differ. Payroll, we shouldn't have that for the personal side. We've got the postage and delivery. We might have that for the personal. We might need to break that out between business and personal if we buy all of our postage kind of stuff together. Professional fees like lawyers and taxes, we might have to break that out as well for like things like tax preparation. Rent expense. Now, if we have a home office, that's something that we may need to be splitting. Repairs and maintenance, same situation. Telephone, also something that we might be splitting up depending on the home usage of the phone. Then we have the travel expenses. We might have personal travel. Now, on the travel side of things, we might break out the travel. We might have like a parent account called travel, and then we might break out, different areas that we've gone to or different travel that we have. And again, the goal would be something different. On the personal side, it would be tracking, the expenses for a different reason than just to see the deductibility of the travel expenses. So you might have something down here like mirroring travel, which would be the same kind of account. So let's say we had 684, or let's do that one more again. We'll say travel, which is 684. So let's say it's 884. Let's go 88400. And then I'm going to say tab. I'm going to set it up. And then I'm going to call this travel. And we might say personal, even though that'll be broken out by the account number. And this is going to go to the personal side of things, on the personal side of things. And then we might want to further break it down to subcategories of that. So I might then say that I want to have a subcategory 88410, let's say 88410, and set it up. This is going to be a subcategory of travel, and this might be like vacation or, summer travel versus, other winter travel and whatnot, that we might want to break it out by season, or we might want to break it out, by where we go, by location. How often do we go to, if we go to a certain place all the time, how much are we spending on a particular location that we're going to compared to another location? And so you can track that. And so I'm going to put it into personal here. And then I'm going to say save it and close it. And then let's say we put 2300 into our travel here. And so there we have it. So now I'm going to say record that, save it, record it. And then if I go into my profit and loss, so if I go back into my profit and loss, We have the travel down here, summer travel, broken out down below. On the chart of accounts, I should have made that a sub account. So let's do that again. If I go to the lists drop down, chart of accounts, my objective was to make that a sub account of the travel. So I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to edit it. And then I'm going to hit the sub account here, and I'm going to make it a sub account of just simply travel for the 8840 travel. And then say OK. And you cannot make an account a sub account of itself because I've got the wrong one. Travel personal. That's the one. 8840. All right. Save it. Close it. I think I got it right that time. So let's go back here. So now it's going to be a sub account here. And if I have winter travel and whatnot, fall travel, then I can put that down below and have that kind of breakout of the subcategorization. So the personal side of things will probably break out in more different categorizations. You might have different categorizations for two businesses as well, if they're really different in nature in terms of the businesses. But the general objective of business being to generate revenue will result in similar accounts. Oftentimes, the general objective of the personal side of tracking is different. It's whatever you're tracking in order to track for. So if I go back to the checking account, then let's say we have another account. I'm going to hit the drop down, and we have in the 800s. We might have things like we say groceries here. Now this groceries, maybe that's going to be a parent account as well. Maybe I want to track the particular large stores I go to, like a Vons or something, like different supermarkets or online shopping. So within the grocery, so I might make a sub account for 875. Let's say it's 87525, 87525, and I'm going to set that up, and I'm going to make it just Vons, I'll say, and it's going to be a sub account of groceries, and it's going to be in the personal side of things. So personal side of things, and then I'll say save it, and so that should be easy for us to break out. And then I'm going to say this is 230, and so let's save that, and let's make another one. I'm going to record it, and then let's make another one and say that this one's going to be going to let's delete. This is going to be Costco, and then I'm going to set up Costco, and I'll use the vendor. I should be setting up the vendor in detail. So I'd go down and say Costco, and maybe I'd say personal. I'll just say personal. Let's just do a P for personal, and then I'm going to put it up here, not down there. P up here, not down there. And then additional, I'm going to say this is going to be P for personal. And then I'll say, okay. So Costco set up. And then if I hit the split button, I'm going to say this is going to be groceries, but I'm looking for Costco. So this is going to be 87530. Let's say 87530, 87530. It's going to be Costco. We're going to set it up. It's going to be Costco, which is going to be a subcategory of groceries, and then it's going to be in the personal class. Let's save that. Put the amount there for 190. And there we have that. Let's go ahead and record that, save it, and close it. And then if I go back to my profit and loss, now we've got that subcategorizations within Costco here. I mean, within groceries as well, breaking it out by where we go. Now you might say, hey, look, I can get this added breakout by looking at the vendor lists. And you can get some added breakout by looking at the vendor lists, but so you might not want to. So you could group them by large stores. If you go to the large store all the time, you might want to see that on basically the income statement. Or you can say, I'm just going to include groceries in general, and then take a look at the vendor list to give you more detail. You might group them by grocery stores versus, smaller stores that you might have. You might have store categories, like this is a grocery store versus online shopping or something like that for my groceries. So, different methods that you might want to break out for the personal shopping. basically telling you, how much you're spending on categories, and that category could be a large store, but it might be something like a large group of stores, a kind of stores. The same might be true for restaurants, right? You might say, I want to break out between my large restaurants, fast food restaurants, and like sit down type of restaurants and whatnot. Coffee shops might be something that you want to break out differently as well. So you might say, I go to my checking account and say we have a new one here, and I'm going to break this out and see, do I have something for restaurants? So yeah, I got restaurants here, so 875. So I might then break out things under restaurants, right? So I might use that as the parent account, and then I'm going to say 87510. Let's say 87510. So it's close to that one, and it's going to be, this is going to be, let's say, fast food. So any kind of drive-through restaurant, I'll put into fast food here, and I'll say that's going to be personal, and I'll try to manage that one down maybe. And again, I should have set up the subcategory restaurant. All right, so I'm going to save that. So then I'm going to put the name in here. It's going to be Wendy's. That's going to be a fast food place, we're going to say. And it's going to be, I'm going to set it up as a vendor. And so, and again, we might want to say, I'll put a P after it up here, no P down here. And then I'm going to say that we want additional and put a P in this added field for personal and okay. So then we're going to set up, let's say we paid 73 for Wendy's, and then we can record that. So let's record that and say save it, close it, and then we might have another item here. Let's say on the 18th, I'm going to delete this, and let's say that this is going to be Outback Steakhouse. Outback, and then I'm going to say tab. We're going to set that up. So set up, it's going to be a vendor, and then I'll put a P after it up here. I'll go to the additional information, put a P over here so we could sort it, and say okay. And then I'm going to hit the splits down below, and I'm going to put it under restaurants again. So, but this time I'm going to make it like a sit down restaurant. So I'm just calling it a sit down restaurant. So this is going to be 87515, 87515, tab, set it up, and we're going to say I'm just going to call it sit down, and that might not be the best technical name, but that's what I'll call it. So I'll break out, fast food versus like a sit down type of restaurant, and then I'm going to say save it there, and say we spent like $274 at Outback, and so I might say record. And then you might even have another category, which might be something like a Starbucks. So Starbucks, I'm going to say tab and set it up, and I'm going to say vendor and put a P after it here, but not down here. Additional information, we'll say this is a P here as well, and okay. And say we spent, $83 at Starbucks because they're kind of expensive. And then we're going to say that this is going to be restaurants. And notice I didn't put the sit down as a subcategory. I'll fix that. And then we've got, let's say 87517, and then I'm going to say tab and set it up. And then I'm going to say this is going to be, we'll say coffee shops, or we might have a broader category than that, but coffee shops. And we're going to say drop down and personal, and then I'm going to make this a subcategory this time I'm going to put this all under restaurant. Save it and close it, and then if I hit the split button, notice it didn't assign the class because this wasn't open when I did so I can assign the class personal, or let's say I didn't assign the class just to check out what would happen. So I'll say I forgot to assign the class. Record, save it. Let's change that one in the chart of accounts. So let's drop down chart of accounts. So we had one that was not picked up here. That was an expense subcategory, the sit down restaurant. I'm going to right click on the sit down restaurant, edit the account. Going to make it a subcategorization of restaurant. Save it and close it. Now let's check out our P&L once again. So here we have it. So we have these items under restaurants, and we have them kind of broken out here. And now we have this unclassified category. Now, anytime that happens, we're going to say, oh, okay, I got to classify something. Something didn't get classified, so I'm going to say, all right, I can do that. And now, since we have it in a separate account down here in the 8 numbers, I know it's a personal account. So I don't have to think. In other words, if I had it lined up with one account that's broken out just by class, although it would be a shorter report, I'd have to think about, okay, is that business 1, business 2, or personal? Because I have a separate account down here, I can say, well, that's in the 8 series numbers, therefore it must be a personal item. And so I'm just going to put it into the right category by double clicking on it, and then say I can fix that like really easy without even thinking much with the TV on and everything. So I'm going to say personal, and then save it and close it, and say yes, and then close this back out. And so now that unclassified area is gone. So you can see this method, we have a fairly long profit and loss here, but we have that kind of double check that we can use to be breaking out the expenses for the 6 series being business 1, and we can line them up in business 1. They start at zeros once you get to the 7 series. The 7 series then go down, and I'll populate here, and then you get to the 8 series down here. Now, if you wanted to then filter your reports, you can go to the Customize Reports up top, Filters, and then you could filter by class. And let's say I just want to see, the personal side of things, and say OK. Now you got a nice report here that just gives us the personal. You still have to deal with the total on the right hand side, but you get a nice easy report to read, and all the other zeros go away because they're zero, and they all will be zero, and you only get that bottom half of the report. Obviously, you can do the same thing by going to the reports header or filters, and then we want to filter by class, and then we can say not personal, but B1 or B2. Let's do the second one, B2, and then we get a nice condensed report. So if I have to give this then to an accountant at the end of the period, I can start to process these reports as necessary, business by business, breaking them out like Schedule C by Schedule C report, instead of having that really long report that could be a little bit burdensome. You can break it down, and you get that kind of double check if you have separate account numbers as well as separate classes.